A hard-working maid's life takes an unexpected turn when she falls in love with a billionaire, faces public scrutiny, and ultimately finds happiness as his wife and the mother of his child. Tracy Hayes was beyond exhausted. She had been pulling double shifts for a week, cleaning hotel rooms during the day and covering for a lazy co-worker at night. Her body felt like it was running on autopilot, and all she wanted was to finish her shift and go home. The VIP suite was the last room on her list, and as she stepped inside the massive, luxurious bathroom, she couldn't help but be amazed. It was bigger than her entire apartment. Who even needs a bathroom this big? Does it have an echo? She mumbled, pouring disinfectant into the sink. She scrubbed, wiped, and rinsed, her exhaustion making every movement sluggish. As she bent down to clean around the bathtub, she rested her head against her arm for just a few seconds, just 5 seconds to breathe. But those 5 seconds turned into a deep sleep, and before she knew it, she had dozed off, her body slumped against the toilet lid. Meanwhile, Logan Martinez, a Millionaire CEO, had just finished a long day of meetings. All he wanted was a hot shower and some peace. As he entered his hotel suite, he loosened his tie, unbuttoned his shirt, and headed straight for the bathroom, eager for the soothing steam. Without paying attention, he opened the door and stepped inside, only to be hit with a shocking sight. "What the hell?" he shouted, his voice booming off the marble walls. His heart pounded as if he had just walked in on a burglar, or worse, a ghost. Right there, leaning against the toilet lid, was a woman in a housekeeping uniform, sound asleep. The sight was so jarring that he instinctively pulled off his shirt as if to defend himself. Tracy woke up to the most terrifying sound she had ever heard, a scream so loud it shook her out of sleep. She jerked awake, lost her balance, and crashed onto the floor, knocking over her cleaning supplies in the process. Bottles clattered. The mop slid across the floor, and water splashed everywhere. Logan stumbled backward, staring at her as if she had just crawled out of the drain like something from a horror movie. "Who are you? What are you doing in my room?" he demanded. Still dazed and utterly confused, Tracy blinked up at the shirtless man in front of her. He was tall, dark-haired, and looked both furious and incredibly handsome. It took her a few moments to piece together what was happening. The luxurious bathroom, the expensive scent of hotel soap, her uniform, his hotel suite. Reality crashed down on her all at once. Panic surged through her as she threw up her hands and blurted out, "I swear I didn't steal anything." Logan blinked, trying to process what he had just heard. "You fell asleep here," he repeated, his tone incredulous. That didn't sound good. Tracy, flustered, raised her hands as if she were being held at gunpoint. "I was just cleaning and you decided to take a nap in my bathroom," Logan interrupted, his eyebrows raised. "Or is your cleaning method just lying down in guest bathrooms too?" Tracy stammered, knowing she was in trouble. "It's not exactly like that. I mean, it is, but..." Logan pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to keep his patience. "So, my bathroom is a dormitory now. It was a very quick nap," she defended. "Oh, sure. Just a little 30-minute nap on the toilet seat. It was only 5 minutes. Logan crossed his arms. "Do you have a stopwatch in your brain, or something?" Tracy sighed, desperate to explain. "Sir, I know this looks bad, but I work morning and night. My body just shut down." Logan took a deep breath. He wanted to be mad, he did. But the situation was so ridiculous that he just couldn't. She looked exhausted, her face flushed with embarrassment, her hair in disarray. She was staring at him like her life depended on his next words. And then, instead of yelling or calling security, Logan did something unexpected. He walked out of the bathroom. Tracy hesitated before scrambling to follow him. He stopped in the kitchen, turned to her with a serious expression, and asked, "Do you drink coffee?" Tracy blinked. "Huh, coffee. Do you drink it?" "Yes. But what does that have to do with..." Before she could finish, Logan grabbed a cup from the counter and handed it to her. "Try it." Still confused, Tracy took the cup and sniffed it. Immediately, she made a face. This is awful. Logan raised an eyebrow. You could tell just by the smell. Tracy hesitated. Yes. A flicker of curiosity flashed across Logan's face. For a man who only cared about business, this was intriguing. Tracy, still holding the coffee like it was a bomb about to go off, shifted uncomfortably. So, am I fired? She asked, barely above a whisper. Logan tilted his head as if considering it. I haven't decided yet. Tracy felt her stomach drop. You haven't? He took the cup back and examined the dark liquid inside. Before that, explain to me how you knew this coffee was terrible without even tasting it. Tracy frowned. It's obvious. It smells burnt. The beans were over-roasted, which made it too bitter. Someone tried to cover it up with sugar, but that just made it worse. Logan's eyebrows lifted slightly. And you figured all that out just from the smell? Tracy opened her mouth to respond, but stopped. Why was he so interested in this? I swear I don't do this all the time, she said, trying to downplay it. I just noticed. Logan watched her like she was a puzzle he needed to solve. Then, suddenly, he leaned back against the counter and said, Perfect. You're going to help me fix this problem. Tracy blinked. I'm going to what? The hotel's coffee is awful. I've complained, but no one can fix it. If you can tell what's wrong just by the smell, maybe you can figure out what's wrong with the food, too. Tracy let out a humorless laugh. Oh, sure, because that's exactly what a cleaning lady does. As of now, yes. She froze. Sorry, but I just clean. I don't work with food. Logan shrugged. Now you do. Tracy stared at him like he had just told her to jump out of a plane without a parachute. I can't just suddenly become a food expert. You don't have to, Logan said, pointing at the coffee. You already are. Tracy's mouth opened and closed. He had to be joking, but his expression said otherwise. Mr. Martinez, look, I appreciate it, but I need my job. Logan frowned. And who said I'm firing you? Tracy hesitated. Was this a test? One moment she thought she was about to get fired, and now the CEO of the hotel wanted her help with food. None of this made sense. This isn't some trick, is it? Like, if I say no, are you going to fire me? Logan sighed, already looking tired of the conversation. If I wanted to fire you, I would have done it already. Now, come on. You've got breakfast to taste. Tracy blinked. Then again. And a third time. What? Do you want to keep arguing, or do you want to get this over with? She knew she should refuse. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the fact that he still hadn't fired her. Maybe she still had a chance to keep her job. Tracy sighed. Fine. But if this is some elaborate plan to fire me later, I swear. Less drama. More coffee. 1 minute. She had been in the CEO's bathroom, convinced she was about to be unemployed. The next, she was sitting at one of the best tables in the hotel restaurant, staring at a spread of fancy dishes. Logan sat across from her, arms crossed. All right, try them and tell me what you think. Tracy glanced between the plates and him. You want me to eat all this? You work double shifts, right? When was the last time you ate? Tracy opened her mouth but realized she couldn't remember. The silence was enough of an answer for Logan. Exactly. Now eat. Hesitantly, she picked up a fork and took a bite of the first dish. Immediately, she grimaced. The sauce is too acidic. Feels like they used too much lemon to cover up something that went wrong. Logan nodded, as if that confirmed his suspicions. She tried a piece of meat and wrinkled her nose. Overcooked. And they used a seasoning that doesn't even go with this dish. Another plate. Is this supposed to be sweet or savory? Because right now, it's just confusing. Logan leaned back, intrigued. She wasn't just noticing the mistakes. She was pinpointing exactly what was wrong. And for the first time in a long while, he was impressed. Tracy wiped her mouth and looked at him. Okay, can I go now? Logan tilted his head. Have you ever thought about working with food? Tracy laughed. You mean eating bad food? No. Identifying it. She stopped laughing. What? You have a rare talent. Most people wouldn't even catch half of what you just pointed out. Tracy scoffed. It's just a silly trick. It doesn't mean anything. Logan studied her for a long moment, then smirked. I bet people have said the same thing about you. Tracy Hayes could hardly believe what she had just heard. Logan Martinez, the CEO of the luxury hotel, wanted her, a cleaning staff member, to help fix the breakfast menu. She had only stepped into the kitchen because he insisted, and now she was being asked to taste food and give her opinion in front of the head chef. The next morning, despite barely getting 3 hours of sleep, she dragged herself into the hotel kitchen, unsure of what to expect. As soon as she walked in, Logan glanced at his watch. You're late, he said. Tracy sighed. If you're going to fire me, just do it now. I'm exhausted. You'll survive. Now! Come here, Logan replied with a smirk. Standing next to him was the head chef, Bennett, a tall man with a serious expression. He frowned at Tracy, clearly unimpressed. This is the cleaning lady, he asked, arms crossed. What is she doing here? Fixing the hotel's breakfast, Logan answered simply. Bennett's jaw tightened. With all due respect, Mr. Martinez, my team is highly trained. We don't need a cleaner's opinion. If your team was as good as you say, we wouldn't be having this conversation, Logan shot back. The room fell silent. Tracy suddenly wished she could disappear. Bennett clenched his teeth, barely containing his frustration. And what exactly does Miss Hayes have to say about my kitchen? He asked. Logan gestured toward Tracy. Let's find out. Tracy froze. Was this happening? She had pointed out the terrible coffee the night before, but now she was supposed to critique the food in front of the entire kitchen staff. Bennett let out a sarcastic laugh. Great. Let's hear what the mop expert has to say. Tracy's face burned with embarrassment, but if he wanted her opinion, she'd give it to him. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed a spoon and tasted one of the dishes. The scrambled eggs are dry. You used low-quality butter and the salt is off, she said matter-of-factly. Bennett narrowed his eyes. What else? She took a bite of the bread. It's not fresh. Either it was baked yesterday or stored poorly. Bennett's arms stayed crossed, his expression unreadable. And the juice, he asked. Tracy took a sip and immediately grimaced. This is a disaster. Bennett raised an eyebrow. Oh, and why is that? Because someone mixed fresh orange juice with store-bought and added a generous touch of disappointment, she said dryly. Logan smothered a laugh, while Bennett looked like he might explode. All right, Miss Hayes, if you're so smart, what do you suggest? Tracy glanced at Logan. Can I speak freely, or is that a fireable offense? Logan chuckled. Speak freely. Turning back to Bennett, she said, This is a 5-star hotel, but breakfast tastes like it came from an airport cafeteria. If you want my opinion, you need to use better ingredients. Real butter, fresh bread, farm eggs. Bennett clenched his jaw. That costs money, and bad food costs customers, Logan countered. Bennett turned red but said nothing. Logan smiled, clearly enjoying himself. Then it settled. We'll test Miss Hayes' suggestions, he said. Bennett looked like he had just swallowed a bucket of boiling oil. This is an insult. I have years of experience, and she just came from cleaning. Logan shrugged. And yet she pointed out every issue with your food in under 5 minutes. The chef said nothing. Logan turned back to Tracy. Well done. Now go get some rest. Tracy left the kitchen feeling like she had just run a marathon, but for the first time, she felt like she had done something important, even if it was just fixing breakfast. Later, while folding sheets in the laundry room, her friend Sophie burst in, wide-eyed and breathless. Tracy, she gasped. Tracy looked up. What? People are saying you humiliated the chef in front of the CEO. Tracy winced. I just told the truth. Sophie gaped at her. And he let you walk out alive? More or less. Sophie grabbed her shoulders. Are you sleeping with him? Tracy nearly choked. What? People are saying he promoted you because you two are having an affair. Tracy groaned and buried her face in her hands. I'm going to disappear into this pile of sheets and never come out. Before she could, the laundry room door swung open. Bennett walked in. Tracy swallowed hard. Hi. Bennett took a deep breath. I wanted to say, I was an idiot this morning. Tracy blinked. Huh. You were right, Bennett admitted. We changed the breakfast ingredients and the guests loved it. Tracy stared, stunned. Bennett was apologizing. He held out his hand. Can I count on your opinion when we try new dishes? Tracy hesitated, then looked at Sophie, who was practically vibrating with excitement. Finally, she sighed and shook Bennett's hand. As long as I don't have to do the dishes afterward. Bennett laughed. Deal. Sophie barely held back a squeal. Somehow, against all logic, Tracy had gone from cleaning rooms to having a say in the hotel's food. She had no idea what would happen next, but one thing was certain. Her life was about to change. And as for the rumors, by noon, whispers had spread throughout the hotel. What started as Tracy fell asleep in the CEO's bathroom had morphed into Tracy and the CEO had a private moment in the bathroom. And by the afternoon, it had turned into Tracy as having a secret affair with the boss, and now has free access to the kitchen. She tried to ignore the stares and hushed conversations, but she had a feeling this was just the beginning. As Tracy changed the sheets in one of the hotel rooms, an all-too-familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. So, you're the hotel's new favorite now. Rose, a receptionist known for her sharp tongue, leaned against the doorway with a smirk. Tracy sighed before even turning around. I'm the official tester of bad food, that's all. Rose crossed her arms. Funny, no one's ever been promoted this fast. You must have done something special to get Mr. Martinez's attention. Tracy rolled her eyes. Do I need to spell it out? I fell asleep in his bathroom, and instead of firing me, he made me taste bad coffee. That's the whole story. Rose raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. Sure, I'm sure that's all it was. Tracy took a deep breath. Look, I'd love to stay and listen to your wild theories, but I have work to do. She grabbed her cleaning cart and pushed it down the hall before Rose could say anything else. The only thing Tracy wanted was for Logan Martinez to forget about her entirely. Hopefully, he had already moved on from his ridiculous idea of making her try more dishes and would leave her in peace. But she should have known better. Logan Martinez never forgot anything. Late that afternoon, just as she was about to leave and finally get some rest, a message from Sophie popped up on her phone. Sophie, Chef Bennett wants to see you in the kitchen. You better go before he throws you into the soup pot. Tracy groaned. This never ends. When she arrived at the kitchen, Bennett was waiting with his arms crossed. This time, though, he didn't look like he wanted to strangle her. Mr. Martinez wants to see you in the restaurant. Now, Tracy sighed again. Does he ever get tired? Bennett smirked. You're still breathing, so I guess not. Resigned, she made her way to the restaurant, where she found Logan studying a menu with the intensity of someone analyzing stock market trends. I should start charging for these consultations, she said, pulling out a chair and sitting down without waiting for an invitation. Logan glanced up. Very funny. I try. Setting the menu aside, he studied her for a moment. I have a proposal for you. Tracy blinked. That doesn't sound good. You'll like it. I doubt it. Logan ignored her skepticism. There's a major food event in Paris next week. One of the biggest in the world. Tracy just stared at him. Okay, and I want you to come with me. She blinked again. I what? You heard me? She let out a laugh. Wait. You want me, to go to some fancy food event in Paris? Exactly. She laughed even harder. Logan, I clean rooms and scrub toilets. You want me to go to Paris just to tell you if a dish is bad? Logan leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his expression serious. "You have a rare talent, a refined palate, something most people don't have. I want you to help me identify the best chefs and ingredients." Tracy shook her head in disbelief. "First of all, I shouldn't even be here. Second, who says I know what I'm doing? I do." She opened her mouth to argue, but the certainty in his eyes stopped her. He believed in her. That made her uncomfortable. "I can't accept," she said quickly. Logan frowned. "Why not?" Because it's ridiculous. I don't know anything about these events. I didn't either the first time I went." She scoffed. "That's different. You're a CEO. You belong there." Logan tilted his head. "And you have a gift." Tracy didn't know what to say. Had anyone ever told her she was good at something? Had anyone ever believed in her? She looked down at the table. "I have a job here. I'll pay you twice what you make at the hotel." Her eyes widened. "What?" "It's only fair since you'll be helping me." She still couldn't believe this conversation was happening. "I can't just drop everything." "You don't have to. It's only a 3-day trip." Tracy bit her lip. This felt like a trap. But at the same time, when would she ever get an opportunity like this again? "I need to think," she muttered. Logan nodded. "That's fine. Just don't take too long." Tracy left the restaurant feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Was she considering this? Was she crazy enough to travel with Logan Martinez? Maybe, but she wasn't ready to admit it yet. She spent the rest of the day trying to push the thought away, focusing on her work, folding linens and cleaning rooms. But every time someone mentioned Logan's name, a strange chill ran down her spine. Had he made that offer? Paris? As if she were someone important? As if she mattered beyond being just an employee who had accidentally caught his attention? The most logical explanation was that he was messing with her. There was no other reason. And yet, when her shift ended and she collapsed onto her couch in her small rented apartment, the thought wouldn't leave her alone. The trip was in 3 days. 3 days. If she said yes, she'd be boarding a plane with Logan Martinez, stepping into a world where she knew no one, didn't understand the rules, and would probably make a fool of herself. But if she said no... Tracy closed her eyes and took a deep breath. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. For years, she had been told she wasn't good enough for anything beyond hard labor. No one had ever looked at her and said, "You're talented." No one had ever believed she was more than a housekeeper. And now Logan Martinez, the CEO of the hotel, was telling her she was special. He wanted her by his side, helping him pick the best chefs and dishes. Even if he was wrong, even if this was all a mistake, for the first time in her life, Tracy wanted to believe in herself. Before she could change her mind, she picked up her phone and typed, "Tracy, okay, I'm in." Seconds later, his reply came, "Logan, great. Get ready for the trip." She let out a long sigh. What on earth was she doing? The day of the trip arrived faster than she expected. She woke up before her alarm, packed a bag with clothes borrowed from Sophie. Because, according to her friend, if you're traveling with a billionaire, at least try to look rich, and headed to the airport with sweaty palms. And just like that, Tracy's life was about to change forever. Logan was waiting in the VIP lounge, dressed flawlessly as always. He looked completely at ease, as if this were just another ordinary day. Meanwhile, Tracy felt like she had stepped into another universe. "You're on time." "That's a miracle," Logan remarked. Tracy rolled her eyes. "I thought about running away, but my bank account convinced me to stay." Logan chuckled. "That's the spirit." Before she could second-guess herself, she was being ushered onto the plane. But, of course, this wasn't just any plane. She had flown before, always squeezed into economy class, hoping she wouldn't end up next to a snoring passenger. But this was a private jet with plush leather seats, gourmet meals, and enough space to dance as she wanted. "Okay," she said, looking around in awe. "This is way nicer than the flying buses I'm used to." Logan smirked. "Good to know I'm already impressing you." Tracy sank into her seat exhaling deeply. You don't need to impress me, Martinez. You just need to make sure I don't embarrass myself in Paris. No promises. She shot him a look. You enjoy making my life difficult, don't you? One of my favorite pastimes. As the plane took off, Tracy closed her eyes, her stomach doing nervous flips. She was actually going to Paris with Logan Martinez. Nothing in her life had ever felt more surreal. When they arrived, the hotel looked like something straight out of a movie. Gold-trimmed furniture, sparkling chandeliers, lush carpets. Everything screamed luxury, making Tracy nervous to even touch anything. But the real challenge was yet to come. That night, Logan took her to an exclusive dinner before the main event, and that's when she realized just how out of place she truly was. The room was filled with people who belonged to a world she would never be part of. Elegant women in designer gowns, men in tailored suits, everyone sipping wine and speaking French as if they were in a film. In her borrowed dress, Tracy felt like an imposter. Logan, on the other hand, moved through the crowd effortlessly, greeting important figures and chatting with world-renowned chefs. Tracy tried to act like she belonged, but then the moment she dreaded arrived. "Miss Hayes, correct?" A middle-aged man approached with a polite smile. Tracy blinked. Yes. Logan mentioned you have an exceptional talent for identifying flavors." Her eyes darted toward Logan, who was watching with an amused expression, clearly enjoying himself. The man handed her a wine glass. "Tell us, what year is this from?" Tracy stared at the glass like it was a ticking bomb. Logan crossed his arms, smirking. "Don't look at me like that. This is part of your job now." Gritting her teeth, she took a sip. The wine was bold and rich, but there was something distinct about it. Without thinking, she said, "This was aged in oak barrels, but it has a fruity note. It must be a recent vintage. Maybe 3 years old." The man's eyes widened. "Exactly." Tracy froze. "Wait, what?" Logan looked pleased. "See? I knew you were good at this." She stared at the wine like it had just whispered the secrets of the universe. Had she gotten it right? Maybe coming here wasn't such a terrible mistake after all. The dinner continued, and with each dish she tasted, her confidence grew. By the end of the night, as they headed back to the hotel, Logan turned to her with a knowing smile. "I have to admit, you surprised me." Tracy scoffed. "I surprised myself." He stopped and studied her. "So, do you still think you don't belong in this world?" She hesitated. For the first time, she wasn't sure how to answer. Maybe she did belong. Maybe she had spent too long believing she wasn't good enough. Logan held her gaze before finally saying, "You've got talent, Hayes. And now that I know that, I'm not letting you slip away." A shiver ran down her spine. Logan Martinez never said anything without meaning it. And suddenly, she realized this trip might change much more than just her career. It could change everything. The next morning, Tracy woke up feeling like she was still dreaming. She was in Paris, in a 5-star hotel, traveling with a billionaire CEO who, for some bizarre reason, believed in her talent. If someone had told her this a week ago, she would have laughed in their face. She sighed and got out of bed, walking to the window. The city stretched out before her. Historic buildings, lively streets, charming cafes. It was like a scene from a postcard, and somehow, she was here. Her phone buzzed with a message from Logan. "Breakfast at 8. Don't be late." Tracy rolled her eyes. Not even in Paris did he give her a break. Despite her complaints, she quickly got ready and headed downstairs. Logan was already at a table, reading something on his phone. "Do you always get everywhere first?" she asked, taking a seat. He smirked. "Some call it punctuality. Others call it efficiency. I call it annoying." He chuckled. When the waiter arrived, Logan ordered a black coffee. Tracy, on the other hand, went for a croissant and hot chocolate. "You're not a coffee drinker?" Logan asked, raising an eyebrow. "I like it, but we're in Paris. The hot chocolate here is practically a masterpiece." He didn't argue. just watched as she took a sip. She closed her eyes, savoring the taste. "Oh my God, this is amazing." Logan shook his head, amused. "You do take food seriously. You brought me here for that, didn't you?" "Fair point." They ate without rushing, and for the first time, Tracy noticed something. Logan's company didn't feel so strange anymore. It felt natural. When they finished, Logan stood up. "We've got a busy day ahead. Don't tell me I have to guess more mystery wines." He laughed. And just like that, Tracy realized this trip was only just beginning. Tracy was in the middle of a whirlwind experience, trying to fit into a world she didn't belong to. Logan had promised a day full of tastings with the best chefs in France, and she was overwhelmed but determined to get through it. As she sampled dishes she never imagined, she surprised herself by recognizing flavors, pointing out mistakes, and even offering suggestions. Logan watched her with a mix of pride and curiosity. After the event, as they walked through the hall, an elegant woman approached. Her name was Vanessa, and Tracy instantly knew she was from Logan's world. The woman looked Tracy over with disdain and questioned how Tracy fit into Logan's life. Logan defended her, saying she had a special talent, but Tracy couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. Later, when she saw Vanessa talking to Logan at the hotel bar, something inside her twisted. Even though she tried to convince herself it was nothing, she felt uneasy. That night, she realized she might be developing feelings for Logan, but the thought of not belonging in his world made her uncomfortable. The next morning, she sent Logan a message saying she thought it was best to go home. To her surprise, he asked to meet her in 10 minutes. Reluctantly, she went to the restaurant where he confronted her. He saw right through her excuses, especially the fact that she had disappeared right after seeing him with Vanessa. Tracy tried to explain that she didn't fit in, that she wasn't sophisticated enough, didn't speak French, and felt judged by everyone around her. Logan pushed back, insisting that she was more talented than those who doubted her, and he didn't bring her to Paris for anything. He offered her a choice: stay and continue, or leave. The decision would be made by noon, and he left her with a card to confirm her choice. Tracy was torn. Staying meant facing a world that didn't accept her, but leaving meant admitting she couldn't handle it. She'd never run from anything before, but this felt different. The question was whether she was ready to stand her ground or walk away. At 3 p.m., Tracy was in the main hall, waiting for Logan. He didn't smile when he saw her, but his expression showed satisfaction. "Good. Now stop pretending you don't deserve to be here and come with me," he said. Tracy, for the first time since arriving, decided she would. That afternoon, Logan had meetings with investors, while Tracy attended a panel about new talents in international cuisine at the food conference. She was determined to absorb as much as she could, listening to the experts, taking notes, and paying attention to what made a dish memorable. But as she sat there, she overheard two women whispering behind her. "Did you see the girl with Logan Martinez? I heard he picked up a cleaning lady and brought her to Paris." Tracy flushed but ignored them. She turned around with a friendly smile. "Oh, thanks for caring so much about my life. I'd love to continue this chat, but I need to get back to the panel. After all, I'm here working. Can you say the same?" The women were speechless, and Tracy felt a surge of pride. She didn't have time for their small-minded comments. She returned her focus to the panel, feeling better about herself. At the end of the event, Logan noticed a change in her. "What happened?" he asked. Tracy smiled. "I think I finally understand why I'm here." He raised an eyebrow. "And who's that?" "Because I'm good at this," Logan smirked. Finally, for the first time, Tracy felt light. She realized she wasn't there because Logan chose her, but because she had chosen to be there. And that made all the difference. Later, while sitting next to Logan, evaluating dishes with top food critics, Tracy didn't feel out of place anymore. Sure, people still stared and whispered, but she no longer cared. That seemed to bother people more than if she had just given up. That evening, Logan hosted a dinner at an exclusive restaurant. The setting was elegant, the food impeccable, and the wine flowed freely. Tracy tried to follow the conversation, but realized she didn't need to try so hard anymore. She could already identify the ingredients and techniques used in the dishes. She was learning. "You're more confident," Logan said after dessert was served. "Do I seem more confident, or am I finally getting it?" Tracy asked, smiling. Logan smiled back. "Both?" When Vanessa entered, she looked flawless, as usual. She greeted Tracy with a sharp smile. "Darling, what a surprise to see you here." Tracy responded, "I'm not surprised anymore. I'm starting to become part of this world." Vanessa raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. Logan, sensing tension, interrupted. "What brings you here, Vanessa?" She smirked. "This world is a game, and there are things that don't fit. Bringing a cleaning lady to Paris? People talk, Logan. Not everyone's happy about it." Tracy felt her blood boil, but Logan calmly replied, "Who cares what they say?" Vanessa laughed. "You've always cared. You wouldn't have gotten where you are if you didn't know how to play the game." Logan smiled slightly. "I always thought the game was about talent, and Tracy has that in spades." Tracy, who had been holding back, decided to speak up. "Vanessa, let me ask you something. What bothers you so much? Is it that I'm here, or that you can't bring me down?" There was a brief silence before Vanessa's expression hardened, but she quickly recovered with a smile. "You think you're so smart, don't you?" "I am smart," Tracy responded, "and you know that." Logan, amused, watched the exchange as Vanessa took a deep breath and looked at him. "Fine, but don't say I didn't warn you." She adjusted her dress and walked out without another word. Tracy sighed and took a sip of her wine. "If she's going to be a recurring problem, I'll need a raise." Logan laughed, raising his glass. "You're already negotiating salary? You're learning fast." Tracy smiled and raised her glass in a toast, but deep down, she knew this wasn't over. Vanessa wasn't the type of woman to accept defeat easily. Tracy had a gut feeling that this was only the first visible threat. If there was one thing she had learned, it was that enemies rarely attacked head-on. They watched, they planned, and when you least expected it, they struck. Tracy wasn't going to let that happen. She was ready to fight. Something changed after that night. It wasn't just Vanessa. There was a shift in the entire atmosphere around Tracy. Before, people observed her with curiosity, waiting for her to fail. Now, the hostility was out in the open. She had become a problem, and she could feel it deep in her bones. The next day, at an exclusive food event, Tracy and Logan walked into Grand Hall, and immediately, the whispers started. But this time, people weren't trying to be discreet. "I heard she was just a maid at his hotel. He brought an amateur to Paris and tried to pass her off as an expert. Or maybe there's another reason she's here." Tracy's anger flared, but she refused to let it show. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Logan, on the other hand, wasn't nearly as composed. His jaw clenched as he shot a sharp look at the whispering crowd. The moment his gaze landed on them, they quickly turned away, pretending they hadn't just been gossiping. "Ignore them," Tracy said, trying to stay calm. "Easy for you to say," Logan muttered, then looked at her, his voice firm. "If you want to prove you belong here, then act like you don't care. The only way to win this game is to stop playing by their rules." Tracy took a deep breath. He was right. If she reacted, she'd be proving them right. So instead, she lifted her chin, ignored the stares, and walked confidently beside Logan, as if the noise around her didn't exist. But the biggest surprise of the night came when they were introduced to one of the world's top food critics, Ken Kyle. "Mr. Martinez, always a pleasure," said the elderly Frenchman, shaking Logan's hand before turning his sharp eyes toward Tracy. "And you must be Tracy Hayes." Tracy blinked in surprise. "You've heard of me?" Kyle chuckled. "Oh, my dear, all of Paris has heard of you." Logan hid a smirk, while Tracy struggled to master shock. "The whole city?" Kyle continued. "People love a scandal, especially one that disrupts the status quo. But I prefer facts." He handed her a tasting plate. "Tell me, what do you think of this dish?" Her heart pounded. The entire room had gone silent, every eye watching her. She picked up her fork, took a bite, and let the flavor settle. After a moment, she spoke with confidence. "The dish is technically flawless, but it's predictable. The sauce is well executed, but it lacks brightness. A touch of citrus could balance out the richness." Another silence followed. Tracy braced herself for laughter or ridicule. Instead, Kyle smiled. "Interesting." She frowned slightly. "Interesting how?" He handed the plate back to a waiter and crossed his arms. "Because you're right." A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. But this time, there were no sneering glances, just respect. Logan's smile widened. "I told you she was good." Kyle nodded. "Mademoiselle Hayes, I'll be watching your career with great interest." Then he turned and walked away. Tracy finally exhaled, realizing she'd been holding her breath. Logan leaned in and whispered, "Now they know you're not here to play." She wasn't sure if she felt relieved or if the weight on her shoulders had just grown heavier. Because the moment you start winning, the game gets dirtier. And Tracy had no idea what was coming next. The next morning, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "If you want to know the truth about Logan Martinez, meet me at the hotel bar at 3 p.m. Come alone." She frowned. What the hell was this? Without hesitation, she forwarded the message to Logan. His reply came almost instantly. "Don't go." A shiver ran down her spine. If Logan didn't want her to go, that meant there was something to hide. And that meant she had to go. At exactly 3 p.m., Tracy arrived at the hotel bar waiting. Then Vanessa walked in. "Oh, so you came after all," Vanessa said smoothly, settling into a seat and picking up a glass of wine. Tracy crossed her arms. "I was curious." Vanessa swirled her wine lazily. "You're smart, Hayes. But you still don't understand this world. And you think you're going to teach me?" Vanessa laughed, shaking her head. "I don't need to teach you anything. I just need to show you something." She pulled out her phone, swiped the screen, and turned it toward Tracy. It was a photo, Logan and Vanessa, seated at what looked like an intimate dinner. Tracy's stomach dropped. "What's this?" "A dinner, dear," Vanessa said smoothly. "You don't think you're the first woman Logan has brought to Paris, do you?" Tracy clenched her jaw. "What exactly are you trying to say?" Vanessa leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You're just a passing fancy for him, a distraction. Leave now before you become something worse, an inconvenience." Tracy almost laughed. She knew Vanessa was manipulative. She knew she wanted to plant doubt in her mind. But one question haunted her. Why had Logan never mentioned Vanessa? Why had he never explained their past? Vanessa saw the flicker of hesitation and smiled triumphantly. "Leave while you still can," she purred, "before he tosses you aside like the others." Tracy stood abruptly, grabbing her bag. "Thanks for the warning, Vanessa. But if Logan wants to get rid of me, he'll have to tell me himself." She turned and walked away without looking back, but her heart was pounding. Because for the first time, a seed of doubt had been planted, and she needed to know the truth. That night, when she returned to the hotel, Logan was waiting for her in the hallway. "I told you not to go," he said, his voice low. Tracy crossed her arms. "And I went anyway," Logan exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "What did she say to you?" Tracy studied him for a moment before answering. "That I'm just a whim to you." Logan froze. His jaw tightened, but his expression remained unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he stepped closer. "And do you believe that?" She hesitated. "I want to hear it from you." Logan didn't look away. His gaze was steady, unwavering. "Hayes, if I wanted just any woman by my side, I would have chosen someone who didn't challenge me every damn day." Tracy's heart skipped a beat. "So, what am I to you?" Logan looked at her as if the question itself was absurd. But in his eyes, she saw the answer. one she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Tracy felt the air leave her lungs as Logan's words sank in. Before she could respond, he leaned in slightly and whispered, "And that scares me more than anything." She was stunned. Of all the possible responses she had imagined, this was the last thing she expected. Logan Martinez, the composed and calculating CEO, had just admitted that she had completely thrown his life into chaos. The worst part, Tracy knew he meant every word, but instead of feeling excited, confusion overwhelmed her. She had never planned for this. She never intended to fall for someone like him. Yet, here she was, standing before him, speechless. Logan watched her, waiting for a response, but she couldn't find the words. After a long, tense silence, he stepped back. "You should get some rest," he said, his voice controlled. But there was something else in his tone, disappointment, and it hit her harder than she expected. Logan rarely showed emotion, but tonight he had opened up to her, and she had frozen. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She retreated to her room, locked the door, and collapsed onto the bed, covering her face with her hands. What was happening to her? She had never allowed herself to feel anything real for anyone because, in her experience, people always left. That had been her reality. Now, Logan had entered her life, turned everything upside down, and asked her to trust him. That terrified her. The next morning, Tracy did her best to act normal. She got dressed, had breakfast alone, and attended the food event as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Logan didn't show up for breakfast, and he hadn't sent her a single message. And for the first time, Tracy realized just how much she missed his presence. The day dragged on. She focused on food tastings, tried to ignore the stares from others, and pretended she wasn't constantly searching for Logan in the crowd. But then, in the late afternoon, an all-too-familiar voice interrupted her thoughts. "Looks like someone's been left behind." Tracy closed her eyes for a moment before turning around. Vanessa stood there, a smug smile on her face. "What do you want now?" Tracy asked, already irritated. Vanessa tilted her head, feigning concern. "Just checking in. Logan seems distant. Guess your little talk didn't go so well." Tracy crossed her arms, feeling her anger rise. "What are you getting at?" Vanessa smirked. "Oh, sweetie, did you think he'd chase after you? Logan doesn't wait for anyone. If you don't play the game, he'll find someone who will." A sharp pang hit Tracy's chest, but she refused to show any weakness. "You sound worried," she shot back. Maybe because, for once, Logan has chosen someone he can't control. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, I do," Tracy said, stepping closer. "I may not know what's going to happen between us, but at least I'm not wasting my time manipulating people just to feel superior." Vanessa let out a short laugh. "You think he cares about you?" Tracy fought back her anger and met Vanessa's gaze head-on. "I don't think." "I know." Then, before Vanessa could respond, she turned and walked away, her head held high. At that moment, Tracy realized something. She wasn't running anymore. She was ready to face this, no matter what. That night, unable to sit still, she made a decision. She knew where Logan was, having dinner at the hotel restaurant with investors, and she knew she needed to talk to him. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her coat and headed downstairs. As soon as she entered the restaurant, she spotted him. Logan sat at the main table, deep in conversation with men in suits. He looked serious and focused, but then, as if sensing her presence, his eyes found hers. For a moment, the world faded. Tracy wasn't sure if she moved toward him or if he moved toward her, but suddenly they were standing face to face. "We need to talk," she said firmly. Logan studied her for a second before turning to the investors. "Excuse me, gentlemen." Then, without hesitation, he took Tracy's hand and led her out of the restaurant. They walked in silence through the hotel corridors until they reached a private balcony. The night air was crisp, but Tracy barely noticed. All that mattered was a man standing before her. Logan stuffed his hands into his pockets. "What's going on?" Tracy took a steadying breath. "You were right." He frowned slightly. "About what?" "About me. About how I always run." He remained quiet, waiting. Tracy glanced up at the sky, gathering her thoughts. Then she met his eyes. "I've never let anyone get close to me. I've always been afraid that, in the end, they'd leave. But you," she swallowed hard, "you made me want to stay." Something shifted in Logan's expression, but he didn't speak. "I tried convincing myself this didn't mean anything," she continued. "But it does. And as much as that terrifies me, I don't want to run anymore." The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken emotions. Then, without a word, Logan took a step forward and kissed her. It was an intense, consuming kiss, one that spoke of everything they had held back for too long. Tracy felt his hands cradle her face, his lips pressing against hers with an urgency that made everything else disappear. The hotel, Paris, the world. None of it mattered anymore. All that mattered was this moment, and she wasn't running away from it. Not anymore. At that moment, nothing else existed, only him. When they finally pulled away, Tracy's heart was still racing. Logan rested his forehead against hers, a small smile playing on his lips. "Finally," he murmured. Tracy let out a soft laugh, warmth spreading through her chest. "Finally," but deep down, she knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning, and for the first time, she was ready for whatever came next. The next morning, Tracy couldn't stop smiling. Since Logan kissed her, everything felt different, like the world had suddenly become more vibrant. She never imagined she'd be here, falling for someone like Logan Martinez, but it had happened, and for once, she didn't want to run. When she walked downstairs for breakfast, Logan was already there, seated at their usual table. "Good morning, Hayes," he greeted with a smirk. Tracy smiled as she sat across from him. "You're in a good mood?" "Surprised?" he asked, tilting his head. She took a bite of her toast before answering. "Let's just say it's unusual." Logan took a sip of his coffee. "So, how do you feel after last night?" Tracy sighed, crossing her arms over the table. "To be honest, still a little confused." "Confused? I've never done this before, Logan. I've never let anyone get this close." He studied her for a moment before admitting, "Me neither." Tracy blinked in surprise. Logan had always seemed so composed, so sure of himself. She never expected that he, too, was stepping into unknown territory. "So, does that mean we're—" She trailed off. Logan raised an eyebrow. "Together?" She took a deep breath. "Yes." He set his coffee cup aside and looked her straight in the eyes. "If you want to be, Hayes?" A small smile tugged at her lips. "I do." Logan leaned forward slightly. "Great." Then he took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. Her heart raced, but deep down, she knew their struggles weren't over. Logan's world was complicated, and not everyone was thrilled about them being together. That afternoon, as Tracy walked through the hotel, she noticed the stairs were different, more hostile. People had been whispering about her from the start, but now it felt worse. As she passed by the reception desk, she overheard two women talking. "Did you see the news?" "Yeah, it's a scandal." Tracy frowned, quickly pulling out her phone. The second she saw the headline, her stomach dropped. CEO Logan Martinez caught in scandalous romance with former housekeeper. She clicked on the article, and the further she read, the worse it got. It claimed she had been promoted under suspicious circumstances and suggested she was using Logan to climb the social ladder. Her phone buzzed. "Logan, where are you?" At the reception, she replied. Minutes later, Logan appeared, his expression dark as he held up his phone. "I'm going to find out who's behind this." Tracy let out a bitter laugh. "Do you need to? This has Vanessa's name written all over it." His jaw tightened. "I figured as much." She took a shaky breath. I knew people would talk, but this is an attack. Logan reached for her hand. I'll handle it. She looked up at him. How? He gave her a small, knowing smile. My way. That night, Logan called a press conference at the hotel. The moment Tracy stepped into the crowded room, cameras flashed, reporters murmured, and nerves clawed at her stomach. But then, she saw Logan on stage, calm, steady, unshakable. He took the microphone. I know many of you are here because of the rumors about me and Tracy Hayes. So let me set the record straight. Silence fell over the room. Tracy Hayes wasn't promoted because of a relationship with me. She was promoted because she is incredibly talented and has worked tirelessly to earn her place. His voice was firm, unwavering. Tracy swallowed the lump in her throat. And as for those who think this is some kind of scandal, Logan continued, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, I don't care. Murmurs spread through the press. I've never been afraid of public opinion, and I'm not about to start now. Then his eyes locked on Tracy. I chose to be with her, and I'm not going to apologize for that. Tears stung Tracy's eyes. Logan had just risked everything for her. And in that moment, she realized none of the rumors, none of the whispers mattered. They would face this together. As soon as the press conference ended, Logan approached her. What did you think? He asked, a teasing glint in his eyes. Tracy let out a laugh, her heart pounding. You're insane, he smirked. And yet, you're still here. She cupped his face, looking at him with certainty. Always. And without caring about the cameras, the flashes, or the gossip, she kissed him. Because for the first time, she knew exactly where she belonged. The next morning, Tracy woke up to her phone buzzing nonstop. Messages from Sophie, from hotel staff, from unknown numbers. Some congratulated her. Others hurled insults, calling her an opportunist. But none of it mattered. What mattered was that, for the first time, she didn't feel alone. When she went downstairs for breakfast, Logan was at their usual table. He seemed different, more relaxed. Did you sleep well? He asked as she sat down. She picked up a cup of coffee, smiling. Better than I have in a long time. He smirked. I bet. Your name is everywhere. She rolled her eyes. You didn't have to hold that press conference, you know. Logan tilted his head. I did. Tracy sighed, grabbing a croissant. You really do love making things complicated, don't you? Logan smiled. Always. Tracy shook her head, laughing, but her smile faded as soon as she spotted a familiar figure entering the restaurant. Vanessa. She looked flawless as ever, but her expression was colder than before. Without hesitation, she walked straight to their table and stopped beside Logan. Can we talk? Vanessa asked. Logan casually sipped his coffee, raising an eyebrow. If this is another one of your speeches, I'm not interested. Vanessa forced a polite smile before turning her attention to Tracy. It's not a speech. I just want to clear a few things up. Tracy crossed her arms. Oh, now you want to talk. After trying to ruin my reputation in front of the whole world. Vanessa sighed. Tracy, understand, it wasn't personal. Tracy let out a dry laugh. Really? Spreading lies about me was just a minor detail. Vanessa pressed her lips together. They weren't lies, just inconvenient truths. Logan leaned back in his chair. Vanessa, if you have something to say, just say it. Vanessa took a deep breath and locked eyes with Tracy. You changed the rules of the game. This world doesn't accept change easily. You might have won this battle, but there will always be people trying to bring you down. Tracy held her gaze steady. So basically, you're telling me to be careful? Vanessa nodded. And to be prepared. What happened now is just the beginning. Logan stood up, his voice calm but firm. Tracy doesn't need to worry. She's not alone. Vanessa studied him for a long moment before stepping back. Good luck to both of you. With that, she turned and walked away. Tracy let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Logan reached across the table, taking her hand. Are you okay? She looked at him, and smiled. Yes, because no matter what happens, we'll face it together. Logan squeezed her hand reassuringly. And in that moment, Tracy knew nothing could bring them down. Their last day in Paris flew by. They attended events, met influential people, and Tracy noticed a shift. No longer was she just the outsider everyone whispered about. People were beginning to respect her. On their final evening, Logan took her to one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. The setting was elegant, the food flawless, but none of it mattered as much as the man sitting across from her. "What happens when we go home?" Tracy asked. Logan twirled his wine glass between his fingers, watching her thoughtfully. "Do you want to go back to the hotel?" Tracy hesitated. She had spent years working hard to carve out a space for herself, but things had changed. "I love what I do, but I think I'm ready for something new." Logan smiled. "Then I have a proposal." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." He set his glass down and took her hand. "Work with me, not as an employee, but as my partner. You have talent, Tracy. We can build something incredible together." Her heart pounded. "Are you serious?" Logan nodded. "I never say anything I don't mean." Tracy took a deep breath. It was a big step, but when she looked into his eyes, she knew her answer. "I accept." Logan's smile widened. "Good choice." They toasted, and that night Tracy knew her life would never be the same. When their plane touched down back home, Tracy took a deep breath, stepping off Logan's private jet. Reality had returned, but her reality was different now. As they climbed into the car, Logan reached for her hand. "Are you ready for this new chapter?" Tracy smiled. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life." Logan pulled her close and kissed her deeply. And in that moment she knew her destiny had never been just about cleaning hotel rooms. Her destiny was beside Logan. The months that followed were a whirlwind. Tracy and Logan worked together, traveled the world, and built something truly special within the Martinez hotel empire. But more than anything, they had each other, and that was all that mattered. Or so Tracy thought, because Logan Martinez still had a way of surprising her. That night, he was about to prove it. The restaurant was stunning, set by the sea, with soft lights casting a warm glow. The gentle breeze brushed against Tracy's skin as she looked at Logan, who was unusually quiet. "You're acting strange," she teased. Logan held his wine glass and watched her for a moment before smiling slightly. "Maybe I'm just waiting for the right moment." She frowned. "The right moment for what?" Before he could answer, a violinist stepped forward, playing a soft, romantic melody. Tracy's heart skipped a beat. Something was different about tonight. Logan took her hand. "Hayes," he said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. She turned to him, surprised by the intensity in his eyes. "Do you remember the first time we met?" Tracy laughed. "Hard to forget. I was sleeping in your bathroom." Logan chuckled. "Yes." And in that moment, I knew my life would never be the same. Tracy's heart pounded. "Logan." He stood up and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. The restaurant fell silent. Tracy felt the world slow as Logan knelt in front of her. "You've challenged me from day one. You made me laugh when I thought I'd forgotten how. You showed me that life is about more than just work and status." His voice was steady, but the emotion in his eyes was undeniable. A tear slipped down Tracy's cheek. "I'm not the easiest man in the world," Logan continued. "But if there's one thing I've learned since you walked into my life, it's that I don't want a future without you." He opened the box, revealing a breathtaking ring. "Tracy Hayes, will you marry me?" Tears blurred her vision. Her chest tightened, her world spun. But there was only one answer that made sense. "Yes." Logan smiled, slipping the ring onto her finger before cupping her face in his hands and kissing her with all the emotion he had held back for so long. The restaurant erupted into applause, but Tracy barely noticed. All she felt was him, and the love that now filled her entire world. 2 months later, Tracy walked down the aisle of a breathtaking garden, her hands trembling as she held a bouquet of flowers. The ceremony was set outdoors at a private estate with a stunning view of the sea, the golden sun casting a warm glow over everything. It felt like something out of a fairy tale. At the end of the aisle stood Logan, looking handsome in an elegant suit, his eyes filled with love. Tears welled up in Tracy's eyes as she took each step toward him, memories of her journey flashing through her mind, the struggles, the doubts, and how love had transformed her life in ways she never imagined. When she finally reached Logan, he gently took her hand and whispered, "You look beautiful." She smiled. "You're officially stuck with me forever." Logan chuckled softly, squeezing her hand. "And I wouldn't have it any other way." The ceremony was emotional, filled with heartfelt vows and promises of forever. When the officiant finally said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Logan wasted no time. He pulled Tracy into his arms and kissed her deeply as guests cheered and tossed flower petals around them. At that moment, Tracy knew she would never forget this day. 2 weeks after the wedding, Tracy stood in their bedroom, staring at a pregnancy test in disbelief. 2 lines. 2. Her heart pounded. "Oh my God," she whispered. She was pregnant. A wave of emotions, shock, excitement, pure joy, washed over her. She and Logan were about to start a new chapter, one she never expected so soon. Just then, the bedroom door opened and Logan walked in. "Hayes, you have to see this. I just got an invite to." He stopped mid-sentence, noticing her expression. His brows furrowed. "What's wrong?" Tracy took a deep breath and held up the test. Logan stared at it, blinking a few times, trying to process what he was seeing. Then his eyes widened. "Is this?" His voice was barely above a whisper. Tracy smiled. "Yes." For a moment, he stood frozen. Then he stepped forward, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her with a depth of emotion she had never felt before. When he pulled away, his eyes were glistening. "We're having a baby," he murmured in awe. Tracy let out a joyful laugh. "We are." Logan pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "I love you." Resting her head against his chest, she sighed happily. "I love you too." At that moment, Tracy knew this was just the beginning of another incredible journey. A new chapter of love, growth, and happiness. This time, it wasn't just the two of them. Now, they were a family. What did you think of Tracy and Logan's story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories.